Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
Okay, so this Nature Neuroscience article you shared with me
Yeah.
about the brain preparing itself.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, I was like, whoa, the idea that our brains could renew themselves, that's super intriguing.
Yeah, it's really captivating. This study really dives deep into this world of astrocytes,
Yeah.
these kind of unsung heroes of the brain. We're talking the cells that keep our neurons healthy and
Yeah.
really functioning the way they should.
See, I always thought it was the neurons that were the stars of the brain. So these astrocytes are kind of
Yeah.
their support crew.
Exactly. And
Wow.
for a long time, the focus has been on the astrocytes that are in the gray matter. So that part of the brain where all the, information processing happens. It's like the computer's CPU.
Okay.
But this study takes us into less explored territory, the white matter astrocytes, the ones that are hanging out in the brain's wiring, so to speak.
All right, so gray matter is where the thinking happens. White matter is the communication network. What's so special about these white matter astrocytes?
So the researchers use some pretty sophisticated techniques. Single-cell RNA sequencing and spatial transcriptomics to get a really detailed look at these cells. And what they found is that white matter astrocytes are much more diverse than we previously thought. There are different subtypes, each with their own unique characteristics.
So it's not just one generic type of astrocyte. There's a whole variety.
Yeah, it seems so. And that's a big deal because it challenges this traditional view that all white matter astrocytes are essentially the same. In fact, one of the researchers, Dr. Fisher-Sternjak, she even said that this discovery challenges the traditional view of white matter astrocytes as a homogeneous population.
Okay, I'm sensing a but coming. There's more to this story.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's where it gets really fascinating. They discovered a subtype of white matter astrocyte that can actually multiply. They call them proliferative astrocytes. And they're primarily found in the cortical white matter, which is a specific area within the white matter.
Hold on, are you saying there are cells in our brains that can make more brain cells? So you're telling me that damage to my brain from, say, a concussion might not be permanent. These cells could actually, repair it.
That's the exciting possibility that this research is pointing to. It's like we found a hidden reserve of brain repair cells. And this builds upon some really exciting previous work by Professor Gutz, another researcher involved in the study. He's been looking at harnessing astrocytes for repair for a while now and finding these proliferative astrocytes in healthy brains adds a whole new dimension to that work.
This is what I call a deep dive. But if these cells are hanging out in the white matter, the brain's wiring, how do they help repair the gray matter where the neurons are?
Well, that's where things get even more intriguing. They observed that some of these proliferative astrocytes actually move from the white matter into the gray matter.
So they're like little repair crews traveling to where they're needed most. Amazing. But how do they know where to go?
That's one of the big questions that researchers are still trying to figure out. It seems like they're responding to specific signals, possibly from damaged neurons or other cells in the brain. And remember those fancy techniques I mentioned earlier? Well, those techniques are allowing scientists to really zoom in and see how these cells are interacting with each other at a molecular level. It's giving them a whole new understanding of the complexity of communication within the brain.
This is definitely more complex than I imagined. Can you walk me through how these astrocytes actually get to the damaged areas? Do they just sort of wander over, or is there a more organized process?
That's a great question. And the answer is still a bit of a mystery. It seems like there's a sort of signaling system going on. Think of it like a distress call. When neurons are damaged, they release certain molecules that act like a beacon, attracting the proliferative astrocytes to the site of the injury.
Okay, so there's a communication network within the brain that we're just didn't understand. Fascinating. But let's back up for a second and talk about these two main types of white matter astrocytes. What are their specific roles?
You're right. It's important to understand the players here. So there's the more common type of white matter astrocyte. It's kind of like the general maintenance crew, making sure everything runs smoothly, providing nutrients to the neurons, and cleaning up waste. It's the kind of astrocyte we've known about for a while.
And the other type, the proliferative astrocyte. That's our star player, right?
Exactly. This one's a bit more specialized. It's mainly found in the cortical white matter. And as we've been discussing, it has this remarkable ability to multiply and potentially migrate to areas of damage. This suggests that they might play a key role in the brain's ongoing maintenance. and repair processes, even in a healthy brain.
So even without any major injuries, there's this constant process
Yeah.
of renewal happening in our brains.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It seems so. It challenges our old understanding of the brain as a static organ. This research is revealing a much more dynamic and adaptable picture. And it's not just about reacting to injury, it's about maintaining the brain's overall health and function over time.
This is blowing my mind. Are you telling me my brain is basically renovating itself on a daily basis?
It really is.
Yeah.
Remarkable, isn't it? It seems there's a whole world of activity
Yeah.
happening within our brains that we're just beginning to understand.
It's like we've been given a backstage pass to the most complex and fascinating show in the universe.
Yeah.
The inner workings of our own brains.
And this discovery of proliferative astrocytes has scientists incredibly excited because it could open up entirely new ways to think about brain repair. Let's look at some examples. Conditions like multiple sclerosis, stroke, or traumatic brain injury. All of these involve damage to the white matter, and these cells might hold the key to developing new treatments.
Okay, so let's talk about multiple sclerosis,
Mhm.
or MS. It's a disease that affects the central nervous system, specifically the white matter, right?
Yes, that's right. In MS, the immune system mistakenly attacks the myelin sheath, which is a protective covering. Around nerve fibers in the white matter, this disrupts the communication between different parts of the brain and the body, leading to a wide range of symptoms.
So it's like the insulation around electrical wires
Yeah.
getting damaged, causing the signals to get lost or distorted. That makes sense. But how could these proliferative astrocytes help in a situation like that?
That's the million-dollar question. If we could figure out how to stimulate these cells to multiply and migrate to the areas of damage in MS patients, it could lead to a whole new approach to treatment.
So we're talking about potentially repairing the damaged myelin and restoring the communication pathways in the brain. That would be a game changer for people living with MS.
It would indeed. However, we need to be cautious. This is still early-stage research. We have a lot to learn before we can even think about clinical trials.
What are some of the challenges
Yeah.
that need to be addressed?
Well, we need to understand precisely what triggers these proliferative astrocytes to multiply and migrate. What are the signals involved? And perhaps even more importantly, how can we control those signals? How do we make sure these cells are doing what we want them to do?
That makes sense. We wouldn't want to accidentally trigger uncontrolled cell growth or other unforeseen consequences. It's like we found this amazing tool, but we're still learning how to use it safely and effectively.
That's a great analogy. And remember, the brain is incredibly complex. It's a delicate ecosystem, and any intervention could have ripple effects.
So there's still a lot of research to be done before we can start talking about actual treatments for MS or any other condition. But the potential is certainly there.
Absolutely. This research has sparked a wave of optimism in the scientific community. And for people living with neurological conditions, it offers a glimmer of hope for a future where repair and recovery might be possible.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential implications for MS. What about other conditions that affect the white matter, like stroke or traumatic brain injury?
Those are definitely areas where this research could make a significant impact. In stroke, for example, a blood clot blocks blood flow to a part of the brain, causing damage to both the gray and white matter.
And the severity of the stroke depends on where the damage occurs and how widespread it is.
Exactly. And current treatments focus on restoring blood flow as quickly as possible to minimize the damage. But what if we could go a step further and actually repair the damage? That's already been done. That's where these proliferative astrocytes could come in.
So instead of just trying to limit the damage, we could potentially reverse it.
Potentially, yes. Remember, these cells have the ability to multiply and migrate, so theoretically, they could be directed to the site of the stroke damage and help with the repair process.
This is pretty mind-boggling. We're talking about a potential paradigm shift in the way we treat brain injuries.
It's definitely a revolutionary concept. And it's not just limited to stroke. Traumatic brain injury, or TBI, is another area where these cells could play a role.
TBI often involves damage to the axons, those long fibers that connect neurons, right?
That's right. And that damage can lead to a whole host of problems, from memory and attention difficulties to more severe cognitive impairments.
So could these proliferative astrocytes potentially repair those damaged axons?
It's a question that researchers are actively investigating. It's too early to say for sure, but the possibility is certainly there.
This research seems to be opening up a whole new frontier in regenerative medicine the implications are huge.
They are indeed. And it's not just about treating specific diseases, it's about fundamentally changing our understanding of the brain's capacity for repair and regeneration.
For a long time, we thought the adult brain was pretty much fixed, incapable of generating new cells or repairing damage. But this research is showing us that the brain is far more adaptable and resilient than we ever imagined.
That's right. The brain is constantly changing and adapting throughout our lives. And this discovery of proliferative astrocytes adds another layer of complexity to our understanding.
Of brain plasticity.
Plasticity, what does that mean? Brain plasticity refers to the brain's ability to change and rewire itself in response to new experiences, learning, and even injury. It's like a constantly evolving landscape, capable of adapting to new challenges and opportunities.
So this research isn't just about treating diseases, it's about unlocking the full potential of the human brain.
Exactly. It's about understanding how the brain repairs itself, how it adapts, and how we can potentially harness those processes to improve brain health throughout our lives.
This is all so fascinating, but I have to admit, it's also a bit overwhelming, it feels like. We're just scratching the surface of what we know about the brain.
It is overwhelming, isn't it? Every time we uncover one mystery about the brain, it seems like 10 more pop up. It is overwhelming, isn't it? Every time we uncover one mystery about the brain, it seems like 10 more pop up.
It's true, but it's also so exciting to think about all the possibilities that are out there.
Exactly, and that's what makes this research on proliferative astrocytes so compelling. It's not just about finding answers, it's about asking new and better questions.
Speaking of questions, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring it back to our listeners. Why should they care about this research?
That's a great question. I think the most important takeaway is that our brains have an incredible capacity for change and adaptation. This research on proliferative astrocytes really challenges the old view of the brain as a static organ. It shows us that even in adulthood, there are mechanisms at play that can promote repair and regeneration.
So there's hope for people dealing with brain injuries or neurological diseases.
Absolutely. This research opens up a whole new avenue for exploring potential treatments. Imagine a future where we can harness the power of these proliferative astrocytes to repair damage caused by stroke, TBI, or even MS.
It's like a whole new frontier in medicine is opening up before our eyes.
And for the listener, it's a reminder that scientific progress is constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible. What seems like science fiction today could become reality tomorrow.
That's a powerful message. It's a reminder to stay curious, to keep learning, and to never underestimate the power of the human brain to heal and adapt.
Precisely. And we're just beginning to scratch the surface of what these proliferative astrocytes are capable of. There are still so many questions to answer, so many mysteries to unravel.
Okay, so what are the big questions that are still out there? What are the next steps in this research?
One of the most pressing questions is how to control and direct these cells. We need to figure out what signals trigger their multiplication and migration, and how we can harness those signals for therapeutic purposes. It's like, we found this amazing tool, but we're still figuring out the instruction manual.
Right, it's not just about getting these cells to multiply. It's about making sure they go where they're needed and do what we want them to do. There's a level of precision that's needed.
Exactly, and that's going to require a deep understanding of the complex communication networks within the brain. We need to figure out how these cells are talking to each other, what signals they're responding to, and how we can influence those conversations.
It sounds like there's a lot of work ahead,
Huh.
but it's work that could have a profound impact
Yeah.
on millions of lives.
Absolutely, and it's not just about treating diseases. This research has the potential to change how we think about aging, learning, and even cognitive enhancement.
So we're not just talking about fixing what's broken. We're talking about potentially boosting brain function in healthy individuals.
That's a fascinating possibility. Imagine a future where we can enhance memory, improve learning, or even slow down the aging process by harnessing the power of these proliferative astrocytes.
That's mind-blowing. It's like we're on the verge of a whole new era of brain health and human potential.
It's an exciting time to be in neuroscience, that's for sure. And it's a reminder that the journey of discovery is never truly over. There's always more to learn, more to explore, and more to wonder about.
Yeah, it really is. It feels like every time we uncover one mystery about the brain, like 10 more pop up.
That's the beauty of neuroscience. You know, it's a field that's constantly evolving, always pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible. And that's what makes this research so exciting. It's not just about finding answers, it's about asking new and better questions.
Speaking of questions, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring it back to our listener.
Yeah.
What's the key takeaway here? Why should they care about this research?
That's a great question. I think the most important takeaway is that our brains have an incredible capacity for change and adaptation. This research on proliferative astrocytes challenges that old view of the brain as like a static organ, shows us that even in adulthood, there are mechanisms at play that can promote repair and regeneration.
So there's hope for people dealing with brain injuries or neurological diseases.
Absolutely. This research opens up a whole new avenue for exploring potential treatments. Imagine a future where we can harness the power of these proliferative astrocytes to repair damage caused by stroke, TBI, or even MS.
It's like a whole new frontier in medicine. It's opening up before our eyes.
And for the listener, it's a reminder that scientific progress is constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible. What seems like science fiction today could become reality tomorrow.
That's a powerful message. It's a reminder to stay curious, to keep learning, and to never underestimate the power of the human brain to heal and adapt.
Precisely. And we're just beginning to scratch the surface of what these proliferative astrocytes are capable of. There are still so many questions to answer, so many mysteries to unravel.
Okay, so what are the big questions that are still out there? What are the next steps in this research?
One of the most pressing questions is how to control and direct these cells. We need to figure out what signals trigger their multiplication and migration and how we can harness those signals for therapeutic purposes. It's like we found this amazing tool, but we're still figuring out the instruction manual.
It's not just about getting these cells to multiply. It's about making sure they go where they're needed and do what we want them to do. There's a level of precision that's needed.
Exactly. And that's going to require a deep understanding of the complex communication networks within the brain.
It's been an incredible journey. And to our listeners, we hope this has sparked your curiosity about the brain and its remarkable ability to heal and adapt. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep wondering.
That's been a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.